I want to ask you something about body count, because what was interesting is while I was in New York, I decided I was off, chilling. And I decided to go to a college campus, my college campus. And I said, I want to talk to these kids. I just want to get a sense from a lot of the guys, a lot of the women, what they're looking for. And it was interesting because when it came to the topic of body count, I was talking to 19, 20, 21-year-old guys mostly. They were saying that they do care about body count, but their numbers were high. So in other words, I would hear, yeah, I care about body count. That's important to me. Like if she's been with more than 15 guys. And I was like, 15, whoa, 15? These people they're 19 years old, 20 years old. So my question to you is, because I know you probably deal with a lot of older guys and they ask for advice. I know you're not in the business of giving advice per se, but when you look at these younger guys, what do their standards look like? Do they have any? Because when you say body count matters to you, but you say like 15 is okay, that's kind of like, to me, not really having a standard. What's happening to these young men?
I think we tend to overestimate the importance really of body count, quite honestly. I think that's as a result of really popularizing it. If you're at a loss for what your topic is going to be on your manosphere panel show, podcast, always default to body count, because it's always going to play. There's a sort of a difference, I think, between what is the concept of like what's high body count and what's a low body count for a younger generation. And I have to take into consideration now that the Generation Z is starting to enter into their 30s now. So it's like, what's the next generation that's coming up after that? They're calling it Generation Alpha. I don't know why, but it's the much younger, like the 18 to 24 demographic right now. So,
but do they care? Like, do you think they still care, or is that just a thing of the past? Like, are they just realizing this is the way of the world now, and to find a woman that's got, coming out of college, a body count of 1 is just impossible almost?
It's unbelievable. Like it's the going joke is like, if a woman tells you what her body count is, multiply it by 3. That's so if it's 1,
nasty stuff.
Oh, you want me to do that sound drop? I still use that sound drop.
It is. I mean, it is to me though, because this is, I'm older. I'm not that old though, and I remember a time where it was very common for women to be in college and to have a body count of 1. And now it just seems impossible. I'm just trying to gauge: is there a drastic difference between what young men, and by young I mean under 25, care about in terms of dating and in terms of what actually matters to them, and then older men, meaning over 25, mostly in their 30s. Do you see a big difference there?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a I don't know, it's a pretentiousness, I think, when it comes to body. If you read like people who talk about body count on like Twitter, it's like they want some virgin bride from the Amish Dutch country in Pennsylvania, and she's got to be wearing that frock and whatever else it is. She's got to have 0 body count, and she's never seen a man in her life before until he walks in, and suddenly they lock eyes and get married and have little babies to churn butter with a golden retriever in the front yard. It's this fantasy land, and it's really a form of virtue signaling for these guys who want to think that they're better than everything. This is the only thing that can set them apart, but that's unrealistic. And I've said this before, is like, what is a low body count and what is a high body count sort of depends on what your expectations are of the opposite sex. So when we're on Access Vegas, Mike and I have asked this question lots of times with the other girls, like, does a guy's body count really matter all that much to you? And for the vast majority of them, the answer is no. No. I mean, they want some experience, a guy with some experience. They don't want a guy who's got like a body count in the triple digits. But what they say the most is like, I don't care what his body count is. I just don't want to meet his ex in the club when one of his girls in the club, because they don't want to be confronted with somebody that he's already had sex with. It's really more of a social kind of like anxiety, I think, that the women have for a guy who has, but generally that's not a problem. I think for most guys, personally for me, when it comes to body count, I look at it from 2 different aspects. The first aspect is gender identity, and then the second one is evolutionary psychology, right? From an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense that a guy would want a woman with a lower body count, because it means that she can pair bond with him. The babies that come out of her are more likely to be his than not. Whereas if a woman has a high body count, it becomes less and less men. I mean, whether this is true or not, this is the sort of the psychological aspect of it. It's not so much about the sexual aspect of it as it is the reproductive aspect of it. So it's like if a woman is sort of like, the town bicycle, they can't trust that the babies coming out of that woman are going to be his children, right? So it becomes a paternity. Like evolutionarily speaking, a woman with a higher body count has a less likely, incidence of having his children, right? So that's number one. And then I've been talking about this. I don't know if you caught this clip, but I was talking about it on my show, and I clipped it, and I thought it was a pretty strong clip. And this came after watching some of the women on whatever podcast talking about body count. And I thought it was interesting because they were talking about like sexual identity, and the same time they were talking about body count. And I'm like, well, is your sexuality part of your identity? Yes, of course it is. Everybody they'll trans this and gay that and everything else. It's like it's part of their gender. I said, okay, so fine. If that's the case, then why isn't your body count part of your sexual identity? So if you have like a woman, you have a very high body count, or a guy for that matter too. You have a very high body count, that becomes part of your sexual identity. So is the high body count something that influences who you are? And it's crickets at that point. Like when I start, about that,
of course it does,
because they don't make that connection. And I'm like, well, if you're going to say that your sexuality is part of like who you are and what your identity is, then your body count is also at least an integral component of what your identity is.
I think they make the connection, but they make it late.
Who you are.
Yeah, no, they make the connection. They just make it too late oftentimes when the body count has been racked, and then they start becoming aware. I don't know if they go to therapy or they start doing some self-awareness practices or somatic work or what it is, but they start realizing there's a lot of damage that's been accrued over the years. And then it becomes, I really do understand why a guy wants to be a woman's first, because the first guy has the capacity to do a lot of damage, to do a lot of good, to set a lot of tone for a woman. If she's really in love with that first guy and he leaves or he cheats or whatever, there is so much brokenness that can get tied to the first guy that I think a lot of these guys, when I hear, oh, I want a virgin, I know it can have an air of creepiness to it, and also an air of just being unrealistic, like a utopia. But I think what they're really saying, a lot of them, is I want to be, if you're a good stand-up guy, you want to get in before the damage, because that first one, women can get, I have seen so many friends just be broken for 2 decades because of guy number one. And there's something about the first kiss, the first person you sleep with as a woman, the first person who you take that trip with, the first can make or break you. So I really get that. I don't think it's the same for guys, because guys that I know, they're first, they're like, oh yeah, it sucked, it was quick, whatever, it's done. And that's it. That's all they say. But women will say, well, he cheated on me, or he left me, or I have an abandonment complex, or oh, it took me, and it is a long just story that accompanies it of then damage that she transfers onto follow-up relationships. So I get the mindset. I do think it's unrealistic in many respects now, especially now, but I kind of get it. And I think these women, the reason the body count becomes important to me is because I'm just watching these young girls not understand the weight of it, as you've just described, but then they get to 35, 36, and that damage starts to accrue, and it does start to register, and they look miserable. It starts to show on their face. They start to feel it in their body. They don't feel well. They turn to wine. They turn to antidepressants. This idea that women can just, you called it, be the town bicycle. I say, the Lincoln Tunnel. The idea that you can do that and not have it impact you at some point is just not realistic for females. So I care about it from a perspective of like, this is just not good for women. It's just not. It doesn't serve them well. And the idea that we tell them that it's okay, or, oh no, you're going to be fine, or worse, that it's empowering, is just, it's destructive. It's destructive to women. It's destructive to the union ultimately. So I'm trying to just, I try to speak to these women just from a perspective of just, you're hurting yourself, like wake up. And I don't think they do that at 25. I think they do that at 35 and up.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, a couple of things. First off, is I like what you said about the damage and the long-term effects. Like, you're not thinking about it in the moment, right? You're thinking about, I mean, there's proximate effects and there's ultimate effects. Okay, so the proximate effect is, well, I'm doing this because my ego is measured in likes and little hearts emojis and everything else, right? So so if I'm getting attention for this, or if I can get paid like through the nose for something like this, on OnlyFans, OnlyFans is, I think, is one of the not only is it one of the great equalizers, but it's also one of the most destabilizing like technologies that we've invented in modern times, I think. So when I'm looking at like people who have really super, like women who have really super high body counts, I think one of the things is, like, you just talked about like your first time, right? Like who you lost your virginity to. That guy is usually the one who sets the benchmark for all the guys who come after that one guy. So really what you're explaining is like I look at body count as not so much as numbers as it is like the potential for that alpha impact on that woman. So for instance, if a woman has like say a 10 body count, that's a higher odds that one of those guys of those 10 is going to be the guy she's pining for. It's going to be the alpha widow, right? The guy that really rocked her world that she can't get over. And so any other guy that comes after, like number 11 and number 12, have to fight against the ghost of alpha's past. They have to fight against that guy's memory, and they have to out alpha that guy in order to be the most significant guy. So they're pining for you and not after that guy. So I tell guys this, I said, look, if you have a woman who has a 25 body count, but you're the most, you create the most alpha impact in that woman's life, that's different than if a woman has like a 3 body count, but her first or her second was so important and so significant an experience in her life that she can't ever, like, he's the one that got away. He was the one, he was her soulmate, and she keeps pining after him. It's not about how many notches are on the bedpost. It's about who made that who did the damage, right? Who was the one that she just simply can't get over. So if that's one of 3, or it's one of 25, and you happen to be the one of 25, then it's not so much about the numbers as it is the impact. Now, right. Now let's just say, for sake of argument, like, for me, obviously a woman who has a 25 body count has a larger pool of men from which one of those guys probably is, or multiples of those probably is. So you're still, not only are you fighting against one, maybe you're fighting against 3. So it really comes down to who made the most impact, who was the best she could do. Mm-hmm. So when that woman hits to be about 30, which is the average age of first marriage for women in the United States right now, she's got a 25 to 30 some odd body count. By the time she gets to 30, and the guy that she's marrying, that guy is really the man of second choice or third choice at that point, and she's still pining after a guy that was one of the 25 or 30 that she was with. Mm-hmm. So a larger pool obviously means more potential for that alpha impact, obviously. But I think it's up to the guys to really sort of figure out how damaged this person is. And I hate to foist it on guys, but that's just something that you're going to have to add to your list of prerequisites. If you're like, people keep saying, well, what do I vet for, Rolo? What do I look for? What are the red flags and everything? I said, well, the first red flag you want to look for is who did the most damage to her, in the past, and is that something that you want to deal with in the future, going forward into the future, because you're going to be fighting against that memory. Now, the other thing you just mentioned was the long-term effects of all of this, mm-hmm. which is, when that woman gets to be 35 or God forbid 38, right before 40, right? That's going to have a significant impact. If she's single still at that point, it's going to have a significant impact on her ego. And so, like, looking backwards, and resenting men in general, we have to also remember that we have a plethora of social conventions that are already established and already in place for women to fall back on, so that they don't have to feel bad about those things. So if a woman is, say, 36 years old, and they come to me and say, Rolo, where are all the good guys? Right. I can't find my soulmate, the one. Though, how come I can't find the one? Or what happened to all the good guys? I go, they're in your 20s where you left them. They were
Yeah.
probably more you probably had a bunch of guys who really wanted to get after it with you and wanted to, start something more significant with you, but you ignored them because you're living the life. And between 18 and 28 years old, that's the window of the greatest window of opportunity for women when they are at the peak of their sexual agency. And that is very powerful. I think one of the reasons why you see like guys who get really despondent and go black pill and get really sort of hopeless, nihilistic about the whole thing, about the dating scene right now, and are basically just dropping out, is because they see women at the apogee of their power, right? Their sexual age, like no other time in human history could women advertise and sell their sexuality as easily as they do now. I mean, you don't have to be a stripper anymore. You can be an OnlyFans stripper from the comfort of your own home, and all it takes is a cell phone.
And they're making a fortune.
They're making.
I mean, the even average,
How do guys measure up to that? How do guys compete with kind of money?
Well, you can't. You can't, because even the average girl, we're not talking about the supermodels, right? It used to be that you had to be here. Now it's the average girl. You can look, somebody that walking down the street, you would barely even glance their way, is now on OF and making a fortune, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a month. I want to switch to a topic
came up with the percentage of women who are like on OnlyFans in the United States right now.
It's crazy.
Like 1 in 30.
Right, and they're so young. Most of them are so young.